All right, well, good morning. It's good to see everyone here. I know the city is not easy to navigate during this time of year, so let me start off first by thanking you all for taking the time to be here. And whether you're joining us in person or watching on video, your presence is a reminder that the challenges we face are shared, and so too must be our commitment to meeting those challenges. As you know, I'm Gaurav. I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as Executive Director and CEO of the New York State Insurance Fund, which is a public purpose insurance company that provides workers' comp, disability, and paid family leave coverage to nearly 200,000 businesses and nearly 2 million people in the state of New York and beyond. Today, we come together at a moment of both extraordinary challenge and immense opportunity. As we all know, climate change is no longer some distant threat. It's here, it's now, it's in the heat waves that injure our workers, the floods that displace our neighbors, the smoke that darkens our skies and fogs our lungs. It's in the economic disruptions that ripple across communities and the rising healthcare costs that follow in their wake. But while the science is clear, and as the consequences are mounting, Washington has chosen to look the other way, even calling climate change a big hoax and a big conjurer. The urgency is met with silence, the data is met with denial, and the federal leadership we all crave is nowhere to be found. But as we all know, there's no time to wait, not when the health of our families and the strength of our economy are at stake. That's why at NYSIF, we've chosen to chart a different path. We're not waiting for permission to act. Under Governor Hochul's leadership, NYSIF understands that insurance can contribute to a solution, not just be a part of the problem. We understand our role as an insurance company is not simply about protecting businesses, but also protecting people. It's about using our voice, our data, and our reach to confront this crisis head on. The cost of inaction is indeed way too high. Through our climate health program, we're using our underwriting methodology to incentivize a reduction in greenhouse gases in the healthcare sector and to build systemic resilience. In just a year, we've signed up 8 hospital systems in New York, 30 facilities. We're studying the health and safety impacts of climate exposure on workers, publishing a study last year that shows a strong correlation between extreme heat and the frequency and severity of workplace injuries and accidents. We're using our pricing power to incentivize businesses in the real economy to buy personal protective equipment to shield employees from the harmful effects of extreme heat. And that's a pilot program that we are expanding today. We're proud to stand with labor, with business, and with environmental leaders alike in recognizing that protecting our planet is not just good policy, but it's good economics. But we're humble about who we are and about what we can accomplish on our own. And we're also aware of all the incredible work your organizations are doing on an even bigger scale. That's why today's gathering matters, because no single institution, no matter how big or small, or how determined, can meet this moment by itself. We must work together, all of us collectively. So in the spirit of collaboration, of science, of justice, I welcome you to this conversation. Let's listen, let's learn, let's challenge each other, and above all, let's leave here committed, not just to understanding the intersection of climate, healthcare, and economy, but to doing something about it. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Chris, and I serve at the National Academy of Medicine as the director of our Grand Challenge on Climate Change and Human Health. And it's wonderful to be here with you all. So wonderful. I love Climate Week so much because I and very much the National Academy of Medicine do our best to really move forward in a spirit of collaboration. And this is about all you can ask for when that's what your ethos is. So welcome. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being part of the conversation today. So quick overview about the National Academies. For those of you who don't know, we were founded in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln in order to provide neutral and evidence-based guidance to Congress as well as to the U.S. population. You can see here some other details about us, but one thing that's important to know for the conversation today is we have many types of programs that we offer, and the one I'll be talking to you about is our most ambitious, and that's our Grand Challenge program, which really seeks to inspire the nation around these collective major levers that we need to pull. And I know there's not a lot of convincing that needs to be done, but I do want to do just a touch of level setting to start us off before handing off to our moderators. And that's why we are here. And we are here because we are part of the problem that we are facing. We know that in the US, between 8.5% and 10% of carbon emissions come from the healthcare sector. And this is obviously problematic for any sector that's looking to combat climate change, but especially so for one that really rallies around the concept of do no harm. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to share with you a little bit about our work to kind of provide you what we see is going on across the national stage. But when I read a bit more about our presenters today and had conversations around really the strategic objectives I think we're all aligned on are here on the screen. And I'm trying to put this into interconnectedness for our work because at the National Academy of Medicine, we kind of consider ourselves the big tent in this area. And that is to say that we're not the ones doing the work. That is all of you. But what we hope to provide is a place to come in, to learn from each other, to say that this topic is important, especially now that people are still working on it. So we can kind of come in and do together and provide each other with motivation, a little bit of protection, and all the good things that happens when people come together. So in framing our work in that way, I pulled out 3 strategic objectives for today. They are transforming systems, catalyzing health impacts, and communicating health impacts, all of course around climate change. So a quick overview of our Grand Challenge. We currently have 5 pillars, which I put into those 3 categories, and those 5 pillars currently map to about a dozen or so programs in those areas, but I'll cover 5 of the main ones. Around transforming systems, the first of which I'll share with you, and many of you in the room are part of this, is our action collaborative on achieving a climate resilient and sustainable health sector. And this program is our largest, meaning that it has the most partners, and it's also the furthest along in its process. And what this program looks to do is be a true public-private partnership with about 100 or so organizations from across the U.S. to focus on 4 areas to decarbonize the healthcare sector first and foremost. You can see here the four working group areas that we have. Extremely proud of the work that has been done by this group over the last year. Equally, if not more so, proud that there are over 50 or so deliverables that have been produced by these working groups that are all on our website 100% for free for anyone who's worked in this space. And in addition to that, what makes these so wonderful, we think, is you can see here the members that comprise this program are from across the entire spectrum of the healthcare sector. And we think that provides some really unique value in the work that we're all trying to accomplish together. So that first program for transforming systems was really looking at the healthcare sector, really within the U.S. And this next program is looking at systems on an international scale, and really those besides the health sector. So there's other big sectors like food and agriculture and transportation, and looking at these sectors and saying, as we are all transitioning towards this net zero target that we're trying to reach, how do we rethink each of these sectors in a way that prioritizes human health at their core? So that is to say, all these decisions that we are making during this transition, how is the first question that we're asking ourselves about human health rather than about profits or economics? All very important part of the picture, but really trying to, and it's being commonly referred to now as a well-being economy. How do we move to this model? And this is being done through this roadmap program, which is looking to develop a consensus study, which is kind of the National Academy's gold standard of what we do. So very excited to see what comes of this. We're just getting ready to launch our 3rd workshop, which is international, co-hosted with the Africa CDC sometime in December. So moving on to catalyzing health impacts of climate change. Again, we have 2 pillars of our program that focus in this area. The first of which is our Climate Communities Network program. And what this program looks to do is go into local communities across the U.S. that are most impacted by and have the least resources to react to changing climate. Go in and partner with leaders of these community-based organizations to bring them in to really try and accomplish 2 things. The first of which is alleviate the issues that they are facing on the ground level, And the second is develop this cohort across the national landscape so that these organizations can learn from each other. They can provide lessons to similar organizations in similar communities who are going through the same challenges. But what we like most about this model is it's a true flipped model. That is to say, the members are the ones who are truly driving this. NAM just serves in a support role for this. So they're driving the full direction. And in addition to that, we also have strategic partners, which are this other entity that are made up of these large resource-rich organizations. And we kind of put them at the table together to co-develop these solutions for what they are facing. And again, take a step back. And we are trying to really exemplify this across our Grand Challenge. So these community members have also been embedded in all the other programs that we'll talk about today, including in the steering committee for our entire Grand Challenge. Next up, one we are very excited about, specifically excited about today, because after 2 years of work, we are excited to announce that through our research and innovation pillar, we are launching officially and formally our research agenda to protect human health and build resilience in the face of a changing climate. And what this program basically is a research agenda that we spent 2 years developing, speaking to some of the foremost experts via interviews and open webinars that we've had to really figure out where does the research in climate health stand right now? What has already been done, and where are those gaps and opportunities that exist, so that anyone who's interested in doing research in this space, again, this is really a product for the community, to be able to come in and say, I want to be impactful in research in climate and health. Where should I start? Where should I look to pull the biggest levers? And that's what this serves to do. You can see here the four areas that we've identified. Very excited that we'll be heading to NYM. I lost Anne, but she's here somewhere after this to launch it. And Renee Salas will be presenting, and she'll have like a call to the community. There's Anne poking out from behind the pillar. Again, also very excited because after only a year and a half, we are launching another product today, again, built for the community, by the community, with the community, around this idea of communicating the climate crisis as a public health crisis. And this concept, to communicating the climate crisis as a public health crisis, we actually really see the Grand Challenge itself serve in this role. It is one of the most important things that the National Academies does. It's written into all these other programs. It also allows us to adapt very quickly. Some of you might see in the endangerment finding report that we're able to pull together. We were able to pull that together because we had this system in place to do so, to communicate quickly, to pull in evidence and information from our members very quickly and get that out publicly in a way that the National Academies has never done before in its 150-year history. But what we're launching today is this Climate and Health Information Gateway that serves as this portal of trusted resources that have been vetted by NAM and NAM staff, about 300 or so in total, that anyone from the community can go in and say, I'm looking to talk to a patient about wildfire smoke. And this gives a list of vetted resources that people can access at any time in order to do that. And then lastly, this arm also hosts our events, and we just had our Climate and Health Summit, which we thought was very successful, and we'll be having again in 2026. But I think what I want to leave you on with this, and it has been such a powerful message to us and our leadership about our work in this space, because there has been a lot of questions, especially 6 months ago, about how should we be communicating this work? How should we still be taking it on? Are we putting our partners at risk by having them on our website? All the conversations that you all were having as well. But we decided to have this summit, didn't market it, didn't do anything, just said people will come if they want. And we're very excited and enthused to see that we had over 3 times as many people come as the prior year before. And it was really a strong message to us that people are really desperate for leadership in this space. They still want to do the work. There still is a ton of good work going on. And it's really like what I hope to carry forward with this presentation, and then have our presenters kind of share what they're doing to echo the same. So that is it for me. So I'm going to welcome our first set of panelists up to the stage, if you'll join me. So first up, we have Dr. Muoi Trinh, who's the Medical Director of Sustainability at Mount Sinai Health System.
Hi, everyone. So I'm from Mount Sinai, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we use the NYSIF Climate Action Pledge to advance healthcare sustainability within our health system. So we kind of talked about this a little earlier. Healthcare industry has a significant environmental impact. The healthcare industry is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions, contributing about 4 to 5% of global emissions. Annually, it's estimated to be somewhere around 2.6 billion metric tons of CO2. It's been equated to having 500 coal-fired power plants burning. Within healthcare, U.S. healthcare contributes about 25% of total global emissions. And inside U.S. healthcare, hospitals contribute significantly to our emissions. And this illustrates kind of why. So hospitals are always open. We're admitting patients from the ED. We're also running our ICUs overnight. The ventilator's always on. We're doing diagnostic testing, MRI, CT scans at all hours of the night. So we never really have a downtime. We consume a ton of energy, a ton of resources. And in the process of taking care of our patient, doing the job that we're supposed to be doing, we're also generating a lot of waste. So we know that greenhouse gases is the main driver behind climate change. With rising temperatures, we've also had increasing frequency and intensity of severe weather-related events. So this is from the U.S. from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It basically shows you all the billion-dollar disasters that have occurred since 1980 to 2024. What you see is very early on, the slope is pretty flat, and then in the last 10, 20 years, the slope has actually gotten pretty steep. And that's representative of how more intense and how more frequent we're seeing these disaster events. In 2024, $180 billion was spent on 27 weather and climate-related events. And we know that climate change is directly related to human health. There are direct effects and indirect effects. We know that pollution, extreme heat events affect patients with asthma, cardiovascular disease, but these, and it also affects vector ecology, the way Lyme disease and West Nile virus spreads, but also these severe weather-related events contribute to morbidity and mortality. They cause property damage, they result in displacement of entire communities, and moreover, hospitals sometimes cannot be functional during these disasters. So our patients don't even have access to care sometimes because of this. So the World Health Organization projects that 250,000 annual deaths in 2030 will be directly due to climate change. So this is a public health crisis. I'm going to talk a little bit about New York State Insurance Fund and the Climate Action Pledge that Gaurav just alluded to. So I'm going to get into a little bit specifics. So participants who sign on receive a 5% premium credit on workers' compensation insurance, up to $1 million annually, if they commit to one of the following climate decarbonization goals. For us, we elected to decrease our emissions by 50% by 2030, with the goal of eventually approaching net zero by 2050. Part of it is also developing a climate resilience plan and climate action plan. And this allows us to be contiguously operational even during those climate disasters. And this is one of the important components of the pledge. Progress needs to be reported on our goals, and it needs to be submitted annually in order to continue to receive the premium credit. So I'm going to say that I think a lot of healthcare and a lot of health systems understand this relationship and want to be able to decrease our carbon emissions and contribute to the solution. So the NYSIF Climate Pledge is actually one of the most impactful pledges Sinai signed on to. And part of the reason is because it tied climate action to financial incentive. It allowed for us to engage in a meaningful way with our executive leadership and our staff. It incentivized robust data collection so that we can actually understand where our carbon emissions are coming from. So we have a full inventory of our carbon emissions. It allows us to develop a strategic plan now for decarbonization. And now we can embed sustainability into our operation and our clinical framework. Sustainability is not really a standalone, and now we can integrate it into our operations. It also elevates the profile and lends credibility to the sustainability program because now the health system knows that we're doing this and this is our goal. It also allows us to fund or reinvest in our sustainability program. So instead of spending $1 million on your workers' compensation premium, you can allocate that cost savings and reinvest it in your sustainability program, whether it's in infrastructure and energy or in clinical sustainability and training your staff. So this is what Mount Sinai's complete inventory looks like. So this is the breakdown based on the World Resources Institute and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So Scope 1 emissions or direct emissions from our facility includes anesthetic gases in vehicles. It's about 74,000 tons. Scope 2 emissions is for indirect emissions from purchase of energy, heating, and cooling. That's about 150,000 tons. Scope 3 emissions is the bulk of our emissions, about 75%. And this is from indirect upstream and downstream emissions from supply chain, medical devices, medications, pharmaceuticals, equipment, food, waste, and it's a pretty big pool. So now that we actually have a sense of where they're coming from, we can now develop a strategy because we know what our hotspots are and we can target them for reduction. So what I've done is separate it into short-term projects that we can achieve with minimal cost. So these are the projects we can achieve now. And then the other side is the long-term capital investment projects that we actually have to put money in, and it's going to take years for us to realize cost savings and energy reduction. So one of the things that I talked about is the anesthesia gas reduction. So one, we've removed desflurane, which is actually a very potent greenhouse gas that we use to anesthetize our patients. We've also decommissioned central nitrous, and moreover, what we've done is made anesthesia gases. We put it on our dashboards. So now our anesthesia staff have integrated metrics on their carbon data. So you not only get your patient's temperature, you not only get your beta blocker usage, but now you know your CDE for the anesthetic that you performed, and that gets emailed to you on a monthly basis. So that's how we can integrate it into clinical care. We've also advanced plant-forward menus in both the cafe and the patient side. We're planning to roll out a menu on the patient side where we have the default be a plant-based item, and the patient can change it, but it's also consistent with a heart-healthy diet. In terms of medication waste, that's about 20% of our Scope 3 emissions. So we've been working with our pharmacists in our pharmacy department to try to make smaller vials available and cut waste from there and decrease purchase of medications that end up being expired before they're actually used. We've also leaned into our reprocessing program and expanded it. So you can see our nurses are very excited and they're helping us collect for our reprocessing program. And the last thing we've done is try to move towards reusable. We know that reusable products, for the most part, will have a lower carbon footprint. So where we can, we've switched back. And this is one example, is with the non-invasive cuff. In 2025, we went from single patient use disposable cuffs to reusable cuffs across the health system. And on the left side, you can see our long-term investments projects, and that includes electrification of our buildings, switching over to LED lighting upgrades, heat recovery, data centers. And so those are much more intensive projects. So I kind of talked about how we wanted to integrate sustainability into our operations. So one way we've tried to do this is with our vendor sustainability scorecard. On the left-hand side, you have an example of what our vendor would see. So these are questions that would pop up. And so vendors have to complete a sustainability scorecard doing new RFPs above a certain threshold. Responses are then scored, and we use it as part of our VA analysis when we're thinking about a product. So now it's not just going to be cost, but it's going to be carbon cost. Certainly, we don't have carbon data for everything, and so we're trying to expand that by increasing questions from asking our supplier for Scope 1 and 2 emissions information and trying to integrate that into our scorecard. On the bottom, you see an example of how we use this. So we awarded the video laryngoscope blade to a contract based on the lowest carbon footprint because they're able to demonstrate a 70% reduction in production from carbon emissions. So the other thing I wanted to do was show that sustainability actually is cost savings. It actually doesn't always cost more. So I kind of talked a little bit about the projects that we worked on, and now I'm showing you the numbers. We saved over $2 million on the various projects that we talked. Some of them I talked about, some of them I did not, but over the course of time. And this is without talking about the premium credit of $1 million that we received in 2024 and 2025. So we know that patient health, patient outcomes, and climate change are linked. Incentives that decrease carbon emissions is often associated with improved outcomes and best practices. I'm going to say associated there. They also decrease operational costs, as you saw in the last slide, and it promotes community and public well-being. So partnerships such as this with Sinai and our insurers can accelerate climate action by facilitating engagement with our leadership and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Muoi. I was jotting down all the things I liked about that presentation and like got a cramp in my hand. So I just wrote blueprint at the top because that was fantastic, amazing. Thank you for sharing. Next up, welcome to the stage, Josh Aglio, who serves as the Vice President of Facilities and Support Services at Maimonides Health.
All right. I don't have any slides, just to start. But that was a really good intro, actually. I'm really happy that I got to go after someone that works at a New York City health system, but on a different side of it, because you really bolstered some of my points. So thank you. My name is Josh Aglio. I'm the Vice President of Facilities and Support Services for Maimonides Health, which is a community health system in Brooklyn. I'm here to talk mostly on the infrastructure capital side, but also to some of the operations, because that is what we focus on. We were an early adopter into this program. We also participate, and we were really thankful. We're a small system. We're only 2 hospitals in Brooklyn. We are Brooklyn's largest hospital, 711 beds. But we're also a safety net hospital, which poses a number of challenges in and of itself. So we're not unlike other New York City health systems, whether they want to admit it or not, in that our infrastructure is a little bit tired. And that's the case for a lot of New York City infrastructure, including, the city's infrastructure itself. A lot of people spoke about climate resiliency, and that's a good way to approach this because the two are inextricably linked. As we're working to kind of electrify and become green and also focus on regulatory compliance, because there is also a tremendous regulatory piece to this as well that ties in. Availability of funding. It's expensive. Make no mistake about it. It's expensive. And I don't think there's anybody in here that thinks it's really cheap. Yes, there are a lot of ways to save money, 100%. But it can be expensive to get started. And so that's why programs like this are really very important. They can help those of us that can't fund the entire thing ourselves to get started. Between the NYSIF credit and a couple of grants that we got from NYSERDA, that's how we were able to start down this path. And I don't know that we would have been able to accelerate it as quickly as we have if it wasn't for those programs. They really are critical. I did just get notification last week. We were one of the New York City Carbon Challenge's top performers for last year, which when you talk about the state of our infrastructure and kind of coming out of a very old situation, is really quite a change. I've been in charge for 4 years, and I don't take any of the credit for it. It's all my team. They work really hard. Programs like this are integral to getting started, and it really is a matter of survival, both for our patients and for the organizations themselves. We can't close, right? We don't get that luxury in healthcare. We have to do everything that we have to do on top of staying not just open, but open and fully operational to the requirement of every regulatory body, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So resilience really does come in healthcare. And if you can look at it from that perspective, right, what you have to do, because there are a lot of people that are looking, this is something that you have to do rather than kind of want to do. Nobody in this room, of course, but others out there. If you look at it that way, it's good both in the short term and in the long term, because we New York City has an infrastructure that is challenged. We have seen the results of that lately. And I'm not talking just hurricanes. Everyone thinks of those big things, but there are plenty of rain events, several rain events a year that overwhelm the New York City sewer system, right? And it doesn't matter how great your system is at your hospital or wherever you are, there's nowhere for the water to go. And so everything just floods. That's happened a number of times. People's mind automatically goes to Sandy, right? But there's 3 or 4 rain events every year. We had a couple this year. There's just not enough places to put the water. And so you have to start looking for that on your own scale. The regulatory compliance piece, yes, does it's always a good nudge in the right direction, right? There's, we saw about local law 87. There's also local law 97, which is the overarching New York City initiative to reduce to reduce greenhouse gases and to kind of force us all in the right direction. So, all that being said, what am I here to tell you? If we can do it, I feel like anyone can, right? And I kind of wanted to give you our little roadmap on how we did it, right? The first is use everything available. I thought you made a really good point in that people are looking for leadership. It's hard to get started. It's daunting. We have that same scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and especially when you're having a very difficult time even figuring out how am I supposed to take all of my old steam chillers and replace them with electric. Can Con Edison even handle all of that for facilities of our size? That's a huge question, within New York City healthcare itself is, if someone like Sinai, if someone like Langone wants to go fully electric, can the grid even handle that? And if so, what is their resiliency plan? I'm thankful that that's not something that is my responsibility to answer, but it is a question that's out there. But use everything available to you. There are partners out there that people don't even know about. In part of this, NYSIF, honestly, I wouldn't have expected that. It's just not my world in facilities. But someone came to me and said, hey, NYSIF's offering a bunch of money to get started. If you do this, we're like, well, we have to do that anyway. So that's great. NYSERDA, that one's a little more obvious. The utility companies themselves, both National Grid and Con Edison, offer incentives to decarbonize your facility. So it's a lot of work, but you have to avail yourself of everything that's out there. The second one, which was a point also made, so thank you, is partner with everyone. It really is a top to bottom initiative. And if anyone in any organization is trying to do it themselves, it's not going to work. We have a multidisciplinary group that works together from facilities, supply chain, legal, real estate, food and nutrition. You will get a lot better results if you don't try to do it in a vacuum. Get everybody bought in. And there are really very exciting things out there that you can use to get people excited. Like we're looking at, making furniture out of plastic that we recycle in our cafeteria. Yes, recycled plastic is not that exciting. That is, one of the oldest recycling things available, but it can really help you. Patients love that, staff loves that, and you really get the buy-in and really get them to feel like they're making a difference. You have to engage your entire organization because, as we saw, a lot of it isn't just the facility emissions themselves, which is where everyone thinks we have the same situation. Scope 3, much bigger than scope 1. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. Be first to the game. And, right now, I don't know that anyone's first, but try to be as close to first as you can. If you're going to work from years behind and fight it, you're going to be working from a much worse place. And I feel like everyone in this room is here because you know the importance of that. But if there is anyone resistant, it's much harder to work from 5 years behind than it is to get in at the ground and really be a part of something great like this. Last but not least would be open, because there's a lot of change that has to go on. It's really, really hard to do what we just saw, to get that kind of buy-in. And we did the same thing with our greenhouse gases, we're trying to get rid of our central nitrous plant, but there's a lot of resistance because, especially in healthcare, it's very, very based on, well, we've done this for a really long time. This is what we're comfortable with. And I don't necessarily know that I want to change. You have to find a way to be open to it and get the people in your organization to be open to it, because this one really is, we're really all in it together. You cannot do it. as a CEO, you can't do it as a C-suite executive on your own. It doesn't work that way. The entire organization, and to that degree, the entire city, state, country, and world is in this together, because it is real, and it's something we're facing now. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. So much that I agreed with on that presentation, the partnership, and just moving forward, even if you don't know where to start. One thing I did respectfully disagree with was I do find reusing plastic in your own facility very exciting. So that was the one piece that I had some disagreement, but otherwise on board with 99% of it. And I forgot my note, but John Utech, welcome you to the stage. Senior Director of Sustainability of Strategy and Finance at Mazzetti.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. I'm going to talk about decarbonization in 2025. I'm just so happy to be here at this event. When I connected with the individuals at NYSIF that started this, I just couldn't believe how amazing that this program is. And I'm excited about the innovation that it's spawning in New York and really hopefully echoing around the country. Because this decarbonization journey that we're on is challenging. I work for Mazzetti, which is an engineering firm, I never expected to be working at an engineering firm, but about 20 years ago, I decided to make climate change kind of my life's mission. And I started sustainability programs at a company I was working at, and then I started a company that built solar systems. And then that led me to the Cleveland Clinic, where I led sustainability for 11 years. And now I'm a consultant helping hospitals and other organizations down this journey. And I've come to realize how hard it is, because healthcare itself is so complicated. It's so complex. The issues that Josh is dealing with, Dr. Trinh, there's so many things that come into bear. Healthcare, it's highly regulated, it's complex, it's changing. We have to deal with this as well. But the facilities that Josh runs have different ages, different technologies. So there's all these different degrees of complexity that makes this hard. But what that means is you need bold goals and powerful collaborations to make it successful. And I have seen in my work that you can get positive savings and cash flow out of this work. And that's really important for healthcare today. Carbon is measured in 3 scopes, scopes 1, 2, and 3. Yes, I'm a carbon accountant. I've been a carbon accountant for 20 years. I love it. It's a really important science, but ultimately, this is just a way of keeping carbon in buckets so that we can track whose carbon is whose. Scope 1 is, I own an asset that burns a fossil fuel, and that's really what hospitals need to care the most about, because ultimately, they're making decisions to put assets in place that use fossil fuels. They need to make different decisions to get rid of that. That's ultimately where healthcare needs to go. Scope 2 is energy that we use that uses carbon, and we have tools for measuring that. And then Scope 3 is everything else. So what's great is this looks super complicated, and by getting money from places like NYSIF, you can sort of take the time in this complicated world to understand your carbon footprint. This is a proud output of a collaboration, a previous job that I had with a great organization called Healthcare Without Harm. Here from Jenny, of that organization later. This looks really complicated, but ultimately it's pretty simple, because this is carbon footprint in different scopes. Light blue is purchased goods. The light red is capital. That's stuff that hospitals buy. Light green is investments. Hospitals are not for profit. They have little pieces of companies. And then the dark red and dark blue is basically the energy that they use. So I'm going to talk about 5 strategies that hospitals can and should do to reduce their carbon in these areas. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, smart electrification, operational resilience, and innovation and supply chain. If you do these 5 things, you're ultimately going to impact, reduce your carbon footprint, and achieve the golden path. So by getting money to study this, the strategies that I talked about are all represented here. This is just a notional, right? This is sort of theoretical. It's largely based on a couple of studies we do, but energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrifying your buildings. You look at this is for a hospital, you look at the carbon you're emitting, and you basically map out a path from where you are to get down to 0. And it's complicated, and it involves engineering. It involves all different kinds of things. But ultimately, you get a beautiful picture like this, and it doesn't need to look exactly like this. But you map out the steps that you need to take to get there by implementing these 5 different strategies. And the most important one is energy efficiency. You've all probably heard about it, but energy efficiency now. Now. Healthcare spends billions of dollars on energy. When I was at Cleveland Clinic, we took usage down 25%, which saved the organization $150 million. Think about the cost implications going to healthcare. NYSIF's helping to seed this kind of work. Why don't hospitals do it? Because they have a million other things to worry about, right? I mean, but this is so important. It's got to be relentless because there are so many other priorities that hospitals have. So hospitals really need to take this to hold and embed it throughout their culture. Reinvest the savings in more energy efficiency and decarbonization. Ultimately, it does enhance patient outcomes because you can use this money for other things. And if you have better buildings, it's better for patients and employees. It does take capital, but you get positive returns from this, and you need to do it now. And that involves thermal, lighting, plugged loads, understanding it, reducing it. There's a bunch of strategies out there. You can go to ChatGPT and it'll tell you 100 things to do. You can go on cool things like treasure hunts. So there's all these building automation systems that can monitor all these different things. You can look at your buildings and it says, these are red and these are green. And you go through this exercise. And if you get them all in the green, you can take your building usage down 10% just doing this, just with some building automation systems. Incredibly powerful things. Every organization should be doing this. Then you need to go deeper. Those things that Josh and Dr. Trinh talked about. You do energy audits to understand your building systems and look for ways to change your building systems and make them more efficient and change the way that you use energy, make it more variable. Healthcare has been designed differently in the last 80 years. So there's all these different building systems and energies, and you want to standardize. And ultimately, that's good for patients, it's good for caregivers, and it's part of decarbonization. So once you've done all that work, you can take your uses down 15, 20, 30%. You want to go to renewable energy procurement. I have these as gray. Capital, typically not-for-profit hospitals want to do power purchase agreements where they're not spending their own money because other people's money can be cheaper. But there's a whole bunch of ways it can be procured. I don't have the time to do them all right now, but get a group together, look at these options. It varies a bit by what part of the country you're in, but there are still good and beneficial renewable energy procurement methods that can ultimately take the electricity you buy and make it green. And then smart electrification. So what our CEO Walt says is no new natural gas anywhere, because ultimately once you put a boiler using natural gas, you really shouldn't replace it for 20 years. So this is a really key thing to understand early, which is that ultimately to make this best, you want to take assets when they're used up at the end of the useful life and electrify them. And that's smart electrification. There's all kinds of different incentives. They vary. NYSERDA here in New York has some really strong ones. It does right now, capital is red because some of these things do require additional capital. But by being smart and understanding loads, ultimately you can lead to cash flows where it is less. It just varies. The impact on operating expense varies. In certain cases, like if you're on a steam system, it can be a lot cheaper to get off of steam and on electricity. But there's a big carbon impact by smart electrification. These are some of the systems that are typically involved. So, use natural gas in kitchens and sterilization and chillers and heaters and that kind of stuff. You're ultimately taking a really important engineering principle, which is that when you burn natural gas to heat water, it's about 80, 90% efficient. Heat pumps, 400% efficient. It's just better. This is going to win because heat pumps transfer energy instead of burning natural gas to heat it. That's ultimately going to be better in the long run. So get on the train. It's smart electrification. It's really cool. Hospitals face all these different storms. By leaning into this and understanding your own energy systems, you can use batteries and microgrids and things that ultimately allow you to serve your patients through hurricanes and floods and all these terrible events that are sadly becoming more and more common. This is a project that I'm working on in Central California, where we're doing a solar microgrid for a hospital, where the hospital will be able to run itself through all different kinds of things. There's a fuel cell, solar, batteries. Yes, that is a giraffe. It is in the logo of the hospital, so it's kind of cool looking tool. But this is the kind of transformative innovation that we need to take healthcare into this century and beyond. Wanted to talk finally about supply chain, which are these other buckets. They're really big. Ultimately, it's really, in my mind, just two things to deal with supply chain. One is prioritizing it in purchasing. Dr. Trinh talked about this. It's looking for products that have a lower carbon footprint, We don't understand those trade-offs in all cases, but look for those decisions where you can. Energy Star, Green Health Approved, LEED, life cycle thinking. Look for those things and make those decisions as much as you can. But ultimately, it's really just talking to your vendors and saying, this matters to my hospital. Ultimately, healthcare, hospitals are the moral authority. We're the doctors and nurses that ultimately order the tests and do these things. And so when hospitals say this matters, the supply chain that has a lot of money to do these things can follow and innovate. And they're a big part of this too. So I gave you some guides and some resources, and I'm excited to talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I love throughout all of these presentations just really the actionable, tangible steps for anyone to get started in the blueprint, and loved your call to action to get on the train. So yeah, great way to kick us off into the Q&A. I have some questions, but we have eaten into the Q&A time a little bit, so would love to hear from the audience. Melissa will pass around the mic. So please let us know your thoughts and questions.
I'm just curious how you feel things have changed since the Inflation Reduction Act credits have been gutted in terms of people's appetite to undertake some of this work. And I think it gets to the red circle that you had raised about capital investments.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the changes impacted solar and wind most strongly, but certain technologies like geothermal, it actually got stronger. Batteries were unaffected. It's more of a mixed bag than people realize. And ultimately, energy efficiency has a really compelling value proposition anyways. I think, so are some of the paybacks a bit longer? Yes, but there's still a really compelling value proposition there. And there's still states like New York that have really compelling and supporting programs to do it. So there's still a really strong business case for this. And I think with the clients that we have, like heat pumps and all these things, like maybe the transition where they'll be cheaper gets pushed out a couple of years, but I think that point is there. And so I think it might slow things down a bit, but I think we're still on the same path.
Sorry, I don't have much of a voice, so I hope you can hear me. But my question is about the investments category and that hospital profile. I've never fully understood that. It feels like a little bit of a black box. So can you, is that the hospital's investment portfolio? Is that the hospital's retirement plan for its employees? How do we start working on that? Because it feels like it's a really big percentage that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Sure. So this is the fact that not-for-profit hospitals allowed to have investments that they use, and they use the income from those investments to support the operations of the hospital. So that's why it's material. There's rules in something called the Carbon Disclosure Protocol, which allow you to account for those investments. It's sort of complicated, but ultimately, kind of where a lot of systems have gone is to simplify this. And there's things called materiality, which is if you own more than 1% of a company, it's material. Otherwise, you don't have to deal with it as much. But I think the key thing is for investment officers like the organization I work with, talking about this issue, talking to the companies that they're invested in, and where healthcare is an activist owner, a big piece of it, this has to be on the agenda for them. So it's complicated, but I think the investment sector has been taking this seriously. Obviously, we're in sort of a different gray zone right now with this issue, but I think that hospitals, if you set a compelling goal, then you can sort of drive your investment portfolio around it. So when I was at my last organization, we started to look for investments that align with those goals. And ultimately, there can be billions of dollars invested. Hospitals can have an impact, but ultimately we're talking trillions of dollars, which what the capital markets are. So I think it's leadership stories and examples. Like one thing we did at my organization was evergreen cooperatives. We created a cooperatively owned entity that did laundry, energy efficiency. We use our own money to help create businesses that had a climate impact and a social impact. So I think that kind of innovation using investments is something that can be really compelling that healthcare can do.
Hi, thanks. We've talked mostly on the mitigation side, but I saw that NYSIF also includes a climate adaptation plan as one of the components. There was some discussion of resilience infrastructure. So I was interested to hear more of what does a climate adaptation plan look like for a hospital system, or what are examples of some components that you've been working on?
So the biggest challenge facing us today, and I'm speaking for New York City because that's my world, is heat and water. So that's what we're trying to become resilient against. Believe it or not, a lot of air conditioning in New York City is made with steam, which is the most counterintuitive thing ever, but that's how the city runs. That's how a lot of hospital runs. So we're running high pressure steam, to a series of steam absorption chillers that are then doing that. So, we're not so much dependent on our air conditioning plant as we are on our steam plants. And that's how you end up with things that look like that. So transitioning off of steam, yes, does have a fantastic cost benefit. It's absolutely correct. But that's not as imminent a threat. That's a longer term threat. Those flooding rains are getting more and more. And we've seen what the power of water can do. And I don't like to go to the extreme, but we saw that during Sandy. That devastated not just the little guys, but Langone, Presby right on the water, both got taken out by that and couldn't function, which is I've only seen it in my lifetime that once. So those are what we're focused on, and you have to be able to run. So it's really a question of how do you not only transition through this, but how do you stay running the whole time and then have a backup system to run? One of the things that we did in healthcare, kind of behind the scenes, it was led by Greater New York Hospital Association, was kind of a blunting of the impact of Local Law 97. So Local Law 97, in its original iteration, came with very, very, very severe financial penalties, to the point that a lot of the hospitals in New York, we formed this collaborative through Greater New York and said, a lot of us are not going to exist if this is the case. New York City responded and, then let us reinvest that in ourselves. And that's kind of where we're at, is a reinvestment in ourselves. The answer for a lot of it, as of today, honestly, is we don't know. We're doing the best we can to stay operational through this and face these. But those are the two things that people are focusing on right now, is water and then heat. How do you adapt resiliency to that? It's very much still a work in progress, and a lot of it is kind of we're kind of figuring out as we go, because we're the first ones through this door, for better or worse.
Thank you all for the information provided. Very informative. I just wanted to find out, with the push towards electrifying things, especially with safety net hospitals that have limited budgets, all these concerns that they have of just staying open, as you say. How do you deal with, I've noticed it with Con Ed pushing the heat pump systems, but then people install these heat pump systems for residential purposes, get all these credits, and then they get their first heating bills, after a New York winter, and find out it's not cost effective for them, on an individual basis. So now, do we have the capacity? Does Con Ed have the capacity to sustain and support all these systems that are being taken off natural gas and becoming, electrified, as well as costs?
I don't listen. Do they have the capacity? I think common sense right now says probably not. But I don't know that they need it today. Most people are going to represent it the same way from, now until 2050, at least preliminarily, and then eventually we'll get looking further out. I don't know if they have the capacity today, but they also don't need it all today. It is a legitimate question, right? But for reference, the heat pumps at home, you would need about 20,000 of those systems to make up for just one system that we're running. And that's why I think that it is important that healthcare is out in front of this. The scope and scale of our impact pales in comparison to any one residential piece. And we look at it differently. Heat pumps Heat pumps are tough in a much, much larger setting. They're great. I have them at my house. I converted my whole house to heat pumps. They're fantastic. But are they scalable to hospitals? It's a big question. I don't know that the tech is there today, but I think it's come a long way very quickly.
And I think it probably will be one day.
So my question is on the technology side. How are you using the advancements in the AI to reduce the impact or reduce the emissions?
Where I'm seeing it most is potentially in building automation systems. There are so many variables that come into play for Josh as he's running at buildings, for taking care of regulations and taking care of patient needs. And, there's a doctor who likes the OR at 62 degrees. I think AI ultimately will allow us to sort of deal with these multiple threads and manage energy much more dynamically than we can do right now. An issue that hospitals face is that, depending on the system, you might be 10 hospitals built at different times with 10 different systems. So hopefully AI can help us take information as it becomes more and more reliable, lift those things up to leadership so we can more consistently sort of implement the kinds of things we're talking about. Because one thing that's difficult is, hey, it's all about energy efficiency. Then, like when I was at the clinic, there was a hospital that got like cyber attacked, and suddenly oh, it's all about, priorities shift. So I think ultimately AI can sit there and potentially just sort of focus on some of the things we're trying to do and help us, implement things. But that's going to take time to make it more reliable, I think.
I agree. I think the preliminary is probably in predictive efficiency, which isn't a thing yet, but it's going to be shortly. Exactly like that. It's taking knowledge of when your occupancy sensors see people in buildings and only lowering the temperature during those times and automatically turning it up. Yes, it can be done, but I think it's going to be done really, really well in probably the next 5 to 10 years, where basically the computer is just, it knows when people are there, it knows when to turn the air conditioning up and down, and it just does it by itself, whereas now there's still very much a human element on the back end.
I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage our first speaker, Seema Wadhwa. She is the CEO of Net Positive Solutions and the founder of Health and Climate. Also someone I consider my best friend in climate and health, but I really think she's everyone's best friend in climate and health. So I don't think I can hold that just to myself. So Seema, take it away.
Chris, you are my best friend. Thank you so much for NYSIF for hosting us and for an amazing first panel. I'm excited to be part of such a great second panel as well. So just to share a little bit about myself, my name is Seema. I've been working in the healthcare space, leading environmental stewardship work for health systems and working with partners now for over 20 years. And earlier this year, I found myself at an opportunity to make a transition. And, what really, with everything happening in the world, it was, and it still is, a really challenging time. And the thing that really stood out to me, which I learned, I will say I define after the fact, action really is the antidote to despair. So with so much that is outside of our control right now, the question comes into play, what is within our control? And when I started to look at my surroundings in terms of what is within my control, there is still a lot that all of us can do. In fact, there's more than that we can do than probably we've ever needed to do any time before. So with that, I recently launched this nonprofit, Health in Climate, and the focus of my work is really bringing health in all climate conversations. So oftentimes I find myself in mixed rooms and having spent so many years and developed such a brilliant community of people working at the intersection of climate and health, when I'm in those rooms with people who are not centered in health or in climate, there's these aha moments of, well, what does health have to do with climate? Or, what is that intersection? And the fact that I have so many of these conversations on what is the intersection is actually troubling. And that's, where there's an opportunity to close the gap. And I think that opportunity exists. We learned a lot of great opportunities from our panel this morning in terms of how do we actually make this happen? What does action look like in this space? What is a roadmap? But I would also compel us to think beyond our own footprints, beyond that 8 to 10%. Let's just think about the math for a minute. Let's say we get it right. Let's say every hospital in this country gets 100% where we need to be, there's still 90% of emissions that need to be addressed. And why would that be our responsibility? Well, first of all, health is all of our responsibilities. We are a mission-driven organization, so it falls within the realm of what we should be doing. But beyond that, it's because we have a unique opportunity to leverage our voice as health professionals in ways that is credible right now that other professions do not have the power to do in the same way we do. So, how do we do that? What might that look like? And that's really kind of where I started my journey with health and climate, focused on, really, I'll say it's a lab accelerator focused on lifting up and scaling solutions that brings health to all climate conversations. And there's three key projects, three key labs, I'll say, that I've been lifting up. And I'll share what all of those are, but just to highlight them. One is looking at the intersection of health, climate, tech, and AI. I'm big on intersectionality and bringing different voices to the table. It was a lot of fun. I'll share that. The second one is RiskRx. That's really looking at what are the financial risks related to climate change stemming from health impacts. I know there's a lot of great partners in the room, David Leathers with the National Commission on Climate and Workforce Health, and others who are really starting to look at the financial impact. So, how do we model that? What does that look like? And then lastly, the power of storytelling. How do we leverage our voice to amplify the reach and impact of the healthcare industry and health professionals in climate action? So for me, this is now my fourth day of Climate Week. We kicked off the week on the 5th, maybe something like that. Thanks, David. I saw that. We kicked off the week with the first ever Health and Climate Hackathon. So the first question I'm going to answer, because I myself did not know, is what is a hackathon? So a hackathon is an opportunity to bring people together, highlight some challenges, and over a sprint, 36-hour sprint, actually develop solutions. And this idea came to me at the end of Climate Week last year. On the train ride home, I said, you know what? I love being energized and learning and speaking and talking to people. But next year, I'd like to also focus on doing and solutioning. So reached out to a great partner and friend, Dr. Chetan Sarabu, who is with Cornell Tech. He's a landscape architect turned pediatrician with a fellowship in medical informatics. So a lot of different focus areas, but really that intersection of climate, health, and AI is a lens that he brings. And so we focused on 4 key areas, 4 challenge areas, including extreme heat, air quality, severe weather, and sustainable operations. And within each of these areas, we really provided data sets and information packets in terms of what are the challenges, here's the data, here are the problems, but most importantly, bringing together people who specialize in climate, who specialize in health, and who bring technical skills to the table. And they came together in groups of 5 to 7 to actually develop solutions. And we'll talk about that. And some of you were here, including Dr. Trinh, who was one of the participants. And so, these resources now live and exist on the website, which is healthandclimate.ai, on these packages that one can leverage to kind of get some of the background as well. So, we had over 150 participants registered. We had 27 mentors. We had 20 advisors, 109 unique institutions. About 40% of those were academic. About half of them had done a hackathon before, and half of them had not. And as you can see, it was a really interesting mix of what areas people wanted to focus on. This being the first time I had ever been to a hackathon, including hosting a hackathon, I was really concerned, are people going to focus on, all of the same things? But I was super impressed how many people were interested in sustainable operations. I was concerned that might not be as high, but it really was fabulous. And, as you can see, there's a lot of different institutions that supported this. And also I wanted to highlight, the power of an idea. I was very, very fortunate to not only be able to work with Dr. Sarabu, but what I learned through this, highlighting the number of mentors and the number of partners who leaned in to help develop tools, is people are eager to help and to support and to partner together. It still baffles me how much time and energy people invested to be part of this. And it just makes me believe that there is a large community who is here to lean in and support everybody. And speaking about support, all of this happened because we had amazing sponsors behind us, including some in the room. Milliman was a data partner. We had McKesson as our lead partner, and Seven Wire, which is a VC. And, while I'm super grateful for their sponsorship, the other thing I wanted to highlight is how these partners leaned in to provide data and to provide mentorship. They spent the day, many of them spent the day with our team members to help develop tools and solutions. So it was also just a lot of fun, and we had a pizza party on Saturday night, which may have been part of the highlight. So I wanted to share some of the judging criteria that we considered, which was, did we have a diverse team? Did we leverage AI? Was it innovative? Was it feasible? And was it scalable? And we also supported that with prizes, cash prizes, and some non-cash prizes as well. But I'm going to highlight, I'm really excited that later today at the National Academy of Medicine event, during the National Academy of Medicine event at the New York Academy of Medicine, we will be presenting the winners, but just highlight outcomes I want to share. There was an individual who was offered a job on the spot by the CEO of 40 Guard, which is an amazing health tool. He was so impressed with what was developed. He said, I have a surprise announcement. I said, oh my goodness, what are we getting into? He's like, I have a paid internship for you. We had McKesson decide that they are going to take the team and have them present to executive leadership on the tool that was developed. We have some tools that were developed here with Dr. Muoi's team that have the potential to be finessed and used in real life. And, there is an LCA tool that was developed by a team that included Stryker that they are going to continue to invest in and build. So it just highlights the art of what is possible now is very different than it was even a year ago. I will just highlight the website. I'm a civil engineer. I spent my education, in engineering, and I had to take one coding class, a Turbo Pascal class. And I said, if I failed that class, I would have to stop engineering because I would not do another coding class. So without any coding, I was able to develop an amazing website. I was able to, curate content. This is all over the period of like less than 6 months. So, just wanted to highlight there's a lot more that we can do. So as I move on from the hackathon and tech and AI intersection, I also wanted to highlight the opportunity to connect climate and risk. So just yesterday, I was able to work with the climate group and put out a new primer that looks at the financial risk associated with that stems from health from climate-driven events. This primer highlights the different risk pathways and also how to integrate them into existing risk frameworks. Just for some context, a lot of large organizations, corporations do something called a TCFD risk analysis, which is built on the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Risk. These are all a mouthful, so bear with me. And essentially, organizations are now looking at what is the financial risk stemming from climate change? And they're done kind of in two areas, which include transition risk and physical risk. So what is the risk to this building I'm in, perhaps from flooding, perhaps from wildfires, and what might that cost me, right? And looking at that across their entire enterprise. What they're not accounting for is, what is the cost of these risks to my workforce from a health perspective? So, those air quality events, they are going to see their employees go into hospital admissions, ER admissions. And the last straw that makes this incredibly important is appreciating that most large employers are self-funded. So 79% of employees in a large organization are in an insurance plan that's self-funded. So what does this mean? This means somebody like a Google, right? They are actually taking on the financial risk of their population's health insurance. So as their employees are dealing more with the health costs from climate events, they will be eating that cost. So just another driver and another incentive to really start to think about and how we calculate the cost. And, when we hear about the billion-dollar events, for instance, those events don't include the cost of health admissions in them. It is a completely missing link. The last thing I'll highlight is Health and Climate Voices, which is healthandclimatevoices.org. This is a repository of some of the leading voices in health and climate as a speakers bureau that are ready to bring their expertise to non-health platforms. We'll also be building out a storytelling section and an opportunity to connect more directly with the community. But ultimately, these are three levers that I think are opportune for us to support and build out further, in addition to all the work we have to do ahead of us in our facilities. So, thank you.
Thank you, Seema. Next up, Jenny Keroack, who serves as the Director of Program Strategy and Management from Healthcare Without Harm.
Thank you. All right. Hi. Okay, so it's really great to be with you all today. I'm so happy to be part of this amazing convening that NYSIF is putting on. So just to give you a little bit about Healthcare Without Harm, we're a 29-year-old organization. We began by working with mercury to help hospitals be safer and not contribute to pollution. We expanded to tackling all environmental pollutants and helping build health resilience into healthcare systems, insurers, pharma, the supply chain, really across the healthcare sector. And our idea is in our name. Healthcare should not harm the environment, it should not harm people. So that's where we're coming from. Where I personally am coming from is the federal government. I thought I'd be a lifetime civil servant. I joined Medicare thinking I'd be there forever. I got to go to the Office of Climate Change and Health Equity. And then 6 years into my tenure, the election happened. And I left in January knowing that I would be fired along with the rest of my colleagues as soon as Trump took office, which is what happened to them, unfortunately. And the reason I say that is that I know many of you probably are feeling scared and feeling like this is a time when you don't recognize perhaps in the things that are happening in this country, and that doing climate action sustainability can feel really hard. And I share my story to say I completely sympathize with you, and I've gone through a lot of lows this year, as I'm sure have many of you. But I do think, and I'm really inspired by our network, our hospitals, and all of the suppliers and providers that we work with, because I see in them the power of this work. As you've already seen, it can save money, it can reduce hazards that healthcare workers are exposed to, that patients are exposed to, that communities are exposed to, and they're still forging ahead. So I'll share with you a little bit about the strategies they've used to communicate that impact successfully, because I think it gives me a lot of hope, and I hope that it does for you as well. So one thing that we kind of always start out with is, I think people have this mental model of like sustainability sitting on top of other things. It's something you do if you have time, if you have will, if you have money. But really, it's something that should be built into every element of a business's planning, because ultimately it can save money. We know that hospitals in our network are going to be facing 10 to 20% increases in energy prices next year. So for them, it's not theoretical, right? If they do nothing, if they don't get more energy efficient, it's going to cost them a lot of money, and that will increase exponentially over time as the energy becomes more expensive. And by the way, as climate change is driving up energy prices through extreme heat waves, through grid failures, it's only going to get worse. So when we talk about this, we say, think about sustainability as being embedded at every level of your organization. And as you've heard, that's really hard, right? That's not easy, going to all these teams, talking to them about sustainability, but it's really impactful. And a lot of teams will see the value in it when they have the opportunity to save money, reduce their own exposure to environmental pollutants. Just as one example, plastic gloves give dermatitis to some clinicians when they're overused. And so there are a lot of ways, right, that this might be something that people actually embrace when they're looking at individual operational challenges and opportunities around sustainability and resilience. To give you a couple of stats that we often throw out there, one is that 70% of healthcare leaders report that climate change has already impacted their organization's ability to deliver quality care. So a lot of organizations are already seeing this on the ground. And so wherever you're coming from, that may be true for you as well. And a lot of your partners might be seeing it too, even if it doesn't feel that way, even if they're not talking about it a lot. Another one that we always talk about is that a majority of clinicians feel that they would consider an organization's commitment to climate action and sustainability in deciding whether to take a job. There's also data that 4 and 5 Gen Zers also see this as a really important element in accepting a job or keeping a job. And so it's a recruitment and staff retention factor as well. And then finally, we already touched on Hurricane Sandy, but I'll just share, NYU Langone lost $400 million in care they were not able to give during that time. So that's not counting the actual need to rebuild the facility. It's just care that wasn't given because they were closed, which itself is a terrible detriment to the community, but also costs them a lot of money. That is their business. And so it's also important to consider that the cost of inaction here can be very high. And I'll share on Langone, they built back in an incredibly smart way, becoming really energy efficient and really thoughtful. And that has already paid dividends. So after they rebuilt, they had this really great HVAC system that's filtering the air incredibly well. And that served them because the next year, the Canadian wildfires happened. And so for their staff and patients, they were safer because Langone had been thoughtful about their rebuilding process. A couple of other examples. So I'll start with the negative here. So Crescent Care Community Health Center, a really important provider in New Orleans, Louisiana. There was a hurricane followed by a heat wave where they lost $250,000 of vaccines. This is a small outpatient facility that is not insubstantial to them. And so they thought, how can we build in a way that will prevent this from ever happening again? So they put in solar with a microgrid to be able to stay open during emergencies, both to keep those products safe, right? But also to serve their patients, their staff. We have seen this at Healthcare Without Harm, that when organizations are able to stay open, they have staff staying overnight, the staff is safer, patients are able to be evacuated to their facilities, they're serving their community. So putting in renewable energy is something I think people often conceptualize as something that's purely a sustainability strategy, but it's not. It's really integral to resilience, and it will only become more so as we have more climate change-related hazards. Except a second example in the food space, we also do a lot of work on renewable and sustainable food systems. So Sutter Health has this incredible program where they're reducing their food waste and donating it to community-based organizations. In so doing, they have saved money, they have reduced their carbon emissions, and they've provided meals. So it's an incredible strategy, I think, to consider also. Again, when you're embedding sustainability in every level of your organization, think about all of those systems, including the food that you provide. We talked about plant-based meals earlier. That's another really important factor here. But also consider how food waste that fills up landfills and leads to pollution can also be utilized to support your community better. And then I want to share a little bit of hope here. So we have the Environmental Excellence Awards, where organizations can share with us the amazing work that they're doing, and some of your facilities likely participate in this. So last year we had almost 500 applicants, as well as a lot of first-time applicants, which was really exciting. And there were $203 million in savings across those applicants. And I'll just share, that's not distributed equally, right? There are some folks that have been doing this for a long time, have really advanced programs, and have amazing savings. One of those is Providence Health System. They had, in 2022, they had reduced their emissions by 11.5%, and they were saving on average $11 million per year based on that reduction. So you've already heard about Cleveland Clinic. There are other facilities that I could list here as well, but there are immense savings to be captured here through sustainability actions. And then I'll also share that, the energy that was saved by these organizations could have powered Boston for almost 3 weeks. So I'm so proud of the work of our network, and I think you can really see here how, it's not only a moral good, it's also a financial good to these organizations. The final thing I'll talk about is plastics. So about half of our partners are working on plastic pollution. I mentioned dermatitis. I'm sure many of you in this room, like me, are scared by plastics and the potential they have to impact all of our health. And that goes for clinicians as they interact with plastics, but also any of us, if you're getting an IV bag, there are additives in that bag that have health effects. And it is truly scary. The research in this area is not something that I'm an expert on. And whenever I do delve into it, I'm terrified. But there are some bright spots here. And I think health organizations that are being really thoughtful about this. So, and I should share at the outset, 99% of plastics come from fossil fuels, right? So it's a greenhouse gas emissions issue as well as a health and sustainability issue. But we are seeing bright spots. So Ohio Wexner Medical Center was able to save $1.4 million by reprocessing some of their devices, as you can see listed here. So cost savings again, as well as an incredible benefit to them. And I should mention here, when you're reusing or reprocessing, that's also a supply chain resilience capacity, right? Like you're not relying on people to deliver things every week so you can catheterize a patient, for example. You have it in-house or you're going externally to get something reprocessed, but hopefully it's closer to your facility and more sustainable in that regard as well than having to have things shipped in every week. Another great example is that Kaiser Permanente, a large provider, they really used their market power here to co-develop and redesign disinfectant wipes that used a lot less plastic, leading to $2 million in savings per year. So I think, for some of you here from bigger organizations as well, think about your buying power and how you can go to your suppliers and talk about your emissions, as Mount Sinai is already doing to great effect. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Wonderful as always. I really loved the way you kind of laid out everything and then looked at it through this lens of the cost of inaction, which I think is a nice additive to everything that we've heard today, in addition to everything you shared. So thank you. Next up, we have Jorge Gastelumendi, who's joining us as the Senior Director from the Atlantic Council on Climate Resilience Center. Jorge?
Thank you, Chris. And hopefully I won't disrupt your flow, but I'm going to stand up because my neck is just killing me. Trying to see the screens. And we just start. I'm going to talk about a vector, a particular hazard within the space of climate change and health. Just a disclaimer, when we started this exercise and this adventure 6 years ago as a Climate Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council, we are housed in a foreign affairs think tank. And so our effort around climate resilience was one that we were trying to figure out whether that was going to be connected with national security or defense, or it was more connected to just, the direct effects of climate change broadly, being that migration, being that agriculture, being that urban communities. And little by little, one thing that we discovered 6 years ago is that the community of practice around extreme heat was extremely nascent. There was not, of course, that the impacts were being felt already by communities. It was really hard to identify networks, communities of practice, communities of knowledge that could share information around what were the impacts of extreme heat across the board. There was also a lack of understanding of whether the scientific community was moving in the direction of sharing that information with policymakers. The connection between different actors in the ecosystem wasn't really thriving. 6 years moving forward, fast forward, it's been a huge change in the dynamics on how extreme heat is being seen, how it's being adopted, and part of the things that we have been doing in those 6 years as riding the wave a bit on this, building of momentum around extreme heat, is to try to understand different aspects of the impacts, both from the economics perspective, from the financial perspective, from even governance perspective. And so we came from that space of climate change as a hazard, as a disruptor. And little by little, we started identifying that there were so many layers of health. So, one of the unique things that maybe, I'll bring to the table is that I come from the climate community. I've been a climate negotiator for the government of Peru, and I've worked on global policy for climate change for years. And so our perspective from several of us was coming from that space, and we started encountering more and more the health interconnections. This is something that drives us and drove us early on, how the future looks extremely daunting. And the fact that we are not preparing for that future at many different levels, from policy to companies to supply chains to communities, is extremely, it's an alarm for us in terms of how we can deal with that. But extreme heat is a growing threat that poses effects across the economy. But what we have learned over the past 5 or 6 years is you need to start from the human being. You need to start from human health to make the case. And if you don't do that, then you lose sight of what you are trying to do with extreme heat in terms of the solutions need to be tailored to that reality, to those realities wherever you are, whether that is in the US or India. Now, the challenge is that systems don't operate that way. When you engage with employers, companies, when you engage with other systems such as policymakers, ministers of finance, they're looking at the overall productivity of the economy. They're looking at the overall productivity of their companies. And so moving from human health into the financial losses and to the loss opportunities, that the potential avoided cost or the cost of inaction, it's sometimes it's quite counterintuitive. You need to start from there and get to health. This presentation is going to go the other way around, the way it should be, which is you start with health and then go into economic impacts and labor productivity impacts and workforce impacts. So we wanted to make it real. Imagine a outdoor worker. The impacts that they will have, are multiple. I won't go into that. I'm a lawyer of all things, so I'm not a scientist or a physician, so I won't be getting into the specific details of how health impacts health, how heat impacts health. But the reality on the policy side, on the community side, on the social side, is that workers here in the U.S. are 13 times, outdoor workers are 30 times more at risk of heat-related illnesses than an average worker. And what is a reality in this country is that 50% of migrant and minority outdoor workers in the U.S. Have reported that, and the majority of jobs on outdoor working goes to those kind of communities, both brown and black. So there is a correlation in terms of how social strata has been built in different countries, including here in the U.S., and how that is going to have an impact on them, and whether they have the right voices to actually be elevated to advocate for those differentiated impacts. So it does extreme heat affects everyone, but it doesn't affect them equally. And I think that's the main point that I would like to put here on the table for this presentation. If you want to take just one point of it, is there is an element of social justice, of climate justice that is critical to address the issue. Because at the end of the day, it's health, it's human health. It's not labor productivity, it's not financial returns, it's human health. We did a study in 2021, so very early on, 5 years ago or so, on the economic impacts of extreme heat, and we chose a particular entry point that was the economic losses around labor productivity. So whether that was the angle that we took, the variable, the factor that we assessed, and what we discovered is that across different sectors, in the U.S. only, in 2020, the effect, the baseline is, it was 2020. So the effect is, a loss of $100 billion in that year, just from that factor, labor productivity losses. And if you start, projecting that into how the world is going to look like, going to our first slide that I had on how the U.S. is going to be covered by extreme heat and populations are going to be impacted by it, you multiply that by 5. So $500 billion will be lost just for labor productivity losses in the U.S. I was talking with somebody from the World Economic Forum yesterday, and they are doing an analysis for the world, global. And by 2030, the lost productivity, they were looking at that as well as $1.5 trillion in 2030 around the world. So that's a huge amount of money. And the question is, who pays for that? Is it communities? Is it individuals? Are you thinking of, whether that could be brought by health systems? Is it governments? Can you use other tools that actually can transfer the risk or, just share the risk across different actors? So with that question in mind, we started thinking of, how we can use, for example, insurance as a way of trying to solve some of these issues in terms of risk management and then finance, of course. And so India is a very different country than the US. So I'm gonna, you're gonna have to do a kind of a special mental effort in terms of translating your reality to that reality. But I'm not gonna talk specifically about India. You can think about that. You can see the impacts that we managed to deliver with just about $350,000 of covering and subsidizing premiums for 21,000 women in India. You can see the results there. But the gist of this slide is that there are ways in which you can use financial mechanisms to start thinking of how you're going to be spreading that risk and how to make efficient the covering for the financial costs that we will need to face when you are dealing with extreme events such as heat waves. So in this case, the elements that we brought to the table were one, risk mitigation. So how do you work with communities to start adopting practices and behaviors and solutions that will reduce the risk of extreme heat during heat stress? Not on heat waves, not on heat shocks, not on shocks, but on stress. Second, in this case, but it might be the case for the US as well, how do you work with them on making them more included into financial mechanisms, in terms of having bank accounts or being active in terms of being able to mobilize resources and be more connected with the economy? It might be the case in the US that you can think about that, but maybe not in all communities. This might be more specific to India, and because we're working with an informal working association. And the third element is risk transfer. So how do you identify the right tools in the system, being that warranties, being that insurance, that could actually deploy resources when most needed, and how you do it in a way that will be responsive to that reality. So in this case, what we applied was a parametric insurance. Parametric meaning that we had a parameter. So instead of usually in an insurance, when you have a car insurance, you crash and then you show the impact and then you get payback. In the case of a parametric insurance, you choose, instead of showing the impact, you choose a parameter that is a proxy to the impact, that assumes that whenever the parameter is hit, the impact is going to happen. Even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. What you chose as a trigger is a parameter. So in this case, a parameter were a set of considerations in terms of temperature and humidity, certain moments of the year, and that when that was hit, then the payoff happened. So the risk management piece is extremely important, that I just wanted to put it here as a solution on all the conversation around how communities, how societies, how governments, how companies, how healthcare providers are going to be paying for this, and where we need to start looking more holistically on how to share that risk and transfer that risk at the end. So thank you.